In today's video, I share with you about Adepticon 2024. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of March of 2024, we have 3 pledges for the Warlayer 5.0 campaign, against the Ogre Horde Hero Quest expansion, Surveyor pledge for the Dungeons and Lasers GameFound campaign, 3 pledges for the current 3D printable coins Kickstarter, these HP trackers from James, and $100 going towards the Master of Realms Kickstarter, which my Patreon supporters voted upon. Go ahead and use the link below to go to my Patreon page where you can get in on this month's GGGGs. Bob will be making his picks this Sunday. This is my 3rd time going to Adepticon, and as always, I had a ton of fun. What is Adepticon? For those of you who have never gone, this is a 4-day wargaming convention that happens in Schaumburg, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. Only a 5-hour drive from St. Louis, which is where I am from. This is one of the biggest tabletop wargaming conventions in the United States and features a bunch of different tabletop wargames. Of course, you have the big players from Games Workshop like Warhammer 40k as well as Age of Sigmar, but you also have Mantic games, which are some of the tournaments that I've played in the past, as well as a number of other publishers, including historicals like Bolt Action. Because it's focused on tabletop wargaming, one of my favorite things is just to wander around the hall as well as the painting contest for the Golden Demon, because it is super inspiring to see not only all of these awesome miniatures that are painted up so well, but also to see all of the terrain, since I really like looking at the variety of amazing terrain that is available out there, not only homemade or scratch built, but also 3D printed or provided by manufacturers. The technology has just gotten better over time, and I think the options that we have as gamers is only increasing. So super inspiring, super fun to be able to look at other people's paint jobs, other people's armies, and other people's terrain. So I always come away from Adepticon being inspired to make my terrain even better, to work on my armies, and to paint them up. So it is just one of the most inspiring places where you can meet up with other people who are passionate about our hobby. You can also find out about new games that might be coming out or new editions and get a lot of news in anticipation of what is going to happen in this space. One of my other favorite things about going to Adepticon is meeting all of you lovely people who are subscribed to my channel or know who I am. A number of folks just came up and just greeted me, which I love, meeting my viewers as well as my Patreon supporters, and was able to meet up with a couple of them, not only to play some games, but to grab a meal or to just spend a little bit of time together. I was also able to say hi to a couple of other influencers in this space, like Uncle Adam from Tabletop Minions, who was working at the Army Painter booth. Andy from Blackjack Legacy, he was running demos at the Mantic booth. And then Ross from Fohammer, who was working in the Artist Opus booth with their dry brushes. So really fun just to catch up with folks, people that I've made friends with over time, and to see how they're doing. So I do go to Adepticon primarily to try out new games or games that I haven't played. So I did wake up at 3 a.m. on Friday morning and drove up to Schaumburg in order to play my first game, which was the Warcry narrative event. That was an all-day event, and a special shout out to both JJ and Brian, who are Patreon supporters of mine. I reached out to them to help me come up with a warband list for my gits, because I haven't played Warcry since the original box first came out. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out here. But since then, it has gone through a couple of different iterations, rule changes, and just added a ton of different factions. But I still had my original warband from that first edition, and only needed to print out a couple of other miniatures to round out my band. And I had a ton of fun. Now, I tied my first game and then lost my second 2 games, one against JJ. But again, these narrative events and the fact that I'm not a competitive player but had a lot of fun as well. I remembered why I like Warcry so much. It's because it is non-competitive. I can't imagine really playing Warcry competitively because it is so swingy, dependent on your rolls of dice, that it's not one of those games that you can really strategically win your way through because it is so luck-based and swingy. And that's one of the games that I really like, a little bit chaotic, a little bit crazy, but where anyone, even a beginner, can possibly win due to the luck of the dice. And I love the fact that it is a relatively simple rule set, and everyone else there who was in the tournament was having a lot of fun and weren't too serious about it, so that made it more of a relaxing environment. And as I've said in previous videos talking about Adepticon, you definitely don't need to even know how to play the game in order to sign up for the tournaments or for these events, because there's a number of people like myself who walk in pretty much say, hey, I don't remember the rules, or I haven't ever played the game before, and people are more than willing to teach you or help you learn how to play the game. So I've always found Adepticon to be super friendly, not a place where you need to be intimidated to sign up for these events. The only issue is it's super hard to get into events because they fill up so quickly. There's about 7,000 attendees and there's just not enough events for the demand. So most of the events actually fill up super quick. So as soon as they're opened up in sometime in early part of the year, you need to sign up quickly or to get on the waiting list. Saturday morning, I played Blood and Plunder, another narrative event, one of the sea battles, which was also super fun. Again, I want to shout out to Christian from Texas. He knew the rules down pat. We were playing on the pirate side, trying to get through a blockade, and he really walked me through all of the rules. Although I have to admit, even after playing that game, I still can't really tell you what the rules are. I definitely need someone to play with who knows what they're doing, because the rules are crunchy. There's a lot of rules that are going on, and it does take a while to learn how to play, although I still really do enjoy that game a lot. And I was really looking forward to fielding my pirate ship that came from the starter box set. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out here, where I show you what's in the starter box, which I think is a fantastic deal because you're getting 2 ships, 2 different factions, and a bunch of their plastic sprues, and was able to not only create this, but also for the British as well. So that was a super good deal, and I was glad to be able to play. That session was slotted for only 2 hours, but it ended up being 3 hours, and unfortunately I had to skip out after hour number 2 because I was signed up for Alpha Strike, which is a simpler version of Battletech rules, where you're fielding more of a skirmish unit and going after one another in a much more simplified form. And I thought I would like that version more than the OG Battletech rules because I tend to like simpler rule sets, but was surprised to find that I found it to be too simple, that there wasn't quite enough crunch or enough oomph to the game or uniqueness to the game that I think I would actually, in this case, play the regular rule set. Now, one of my Patreon supporters, Max, is telling me that there is sort of an in-between of Alpha Strike and the regular OG rule set. So it's a simplified version of the regular one. So that might be something that I will look into as a happy medium between the two. But we'll go ahead and wait and see. Great thing was, I do intend to get more into the Battletech universe and am currently working on a larger version of 3D printed Battletech miniatures as well as terrain, and that'll be an upcoming video hopefully soon. And then I had a couple of hours where I did peruse the vendor hall, but I did play Onslaught, learn to play in the evening. My verdict with Onslaught was I actually liked it better than Alpha Strike, but I found that, perfectly okay skirmish level game, but I remember that I had invested in another D&D skirmish game a while ago that is out of print right now called Dungeons Command, and thought that that was a really fun skirmish level board game using D&D miniatures, and found Onslaught not to be as fun as that original. Also, my friends and I last year at Gen Con purchased Trials of Tempest, which is more than 1v1. You can play up to 8 players on 2 different teams fighting against each other. We played that game a couple of times, and I definitely prefer that game over Onslaught. Really was strange why both Onslaught and Trials of Tempest came out about the same time without really much crossover between the two. But I feel like Onslaught will probably slip by the wayside because there weren't a lot of people demoing that game. So not sure what the future is going to be for that. This year I didn't sign up for any of the Mantic tournaments, mostly because, like I said, I would rather try out different games and new games. Because I'm not a competitive player, I don't come in trying to win games or anything like that. I would much rather just try out new games or ones that I haven't played before. But I did see the Mantic guys and talked with them a little bit. It seems like that community continues to grow, which is super exciting. And when I did visit the vendor hall, one of the first places that I went to was the Mantic booth, where again I saw Andy from Blackjack Legacy. He was demoing their new upcoming game called Halo Flashpoint, which is basically Dead Zone within the Halo universe. And there are a number of rule changes, but overall, the bones of the rule set is from Dead Zone, which I am super excited about. I'm also not only excited about the Spartan miniatures, which are a larger scale than all of their regular Dead Zone 28mm scale stuff, but also the terrain is going to be this colored, I think it's MDF quality, I don't think it's cardboard, pre-colored terrain. So there isn't going to be any need to paint up terrain, which I think is fantastic. So I think this is going to breathe new life back into Dead Zone, hopefully grow that community. I'm excited about it coming out. It isn't going to be kickstarted, but there will be pre-orders that will be going up. And I think Andy said it's going to deliver later on this year. So super excited about that. Excited about getting that game when it does come out. I actually didn't demo a whole lot of other games in the vendor hall. I did demo a game called Breachstorm. Again, I thought it had really cool mechanics, but in my mind I'm thinking, boy, do I really need another rule set, sci-fi rule set to get into, as I am currently invested in one-page rules in Grimdark Future. So there are just a ton of games that are out there. I do think a number of them do have some really cool and good mechanics, but I'm trying to look for a simplified rule set that is quick to get to the table, easy to play. Because I'm not super competitive, I'm not concerned a lot about balance or optimizing my army list, but really the rule of cool is what gets me. And so there's a ton of awesome looking miniatures that are out there, and game systems as well. One of the booths that I did stop by was Ravaged Star, which I know was a Kickstarter for these miniatures and an alternative rule set from GW. And I did talk with the developer a little bit, and I had actually backed Revenant's Run, which is a 3D printable campaign that happened where you can also get the physical miniatures. I really wished that Ravaged Star also had a STL option. I would have gotten into it if that was the case. I just don't prefer to buy mass army physical miniatures anymore and would rather 3D print them. But did talk with the producer, and I might actually look into the rule set and compare it to one-page rules, because he said that it is simple like one-page rules, and that I would probably like it. But he also did say that he's going to follow up with another GameFound campaign for Revenant's Run, where there will be another faction introduced and upgrades for the current 2 factions from that campaign. So I'm excited about that, excited about potentially collaborating with him or producing some videos about that universe as well. Speaking of 3D printing, there is an increase of 3D printable companies that was there at Adepticon, and I think that's only going to be the future of tabletop wargaming, is that 3D printing armies and terrain is just going to become bigger and bigger. So Loot Studios was there with a pretty big booth where they were actually not selling any physical miniatures, but were having people sign up, showing all of the STLs that you're going to get, and having people sign up for their subscription services. And an interesting thing, as I was talking with one of them, is they're going to be coming out with their own game. It looks pretty exciting where you have these cards and it's going to be a skirmish. You're going to be able to print out all of the miniatures as well as the terrain for the game, which is something that I am looking for, is the ability to print out my armies, to be able to have access to the STLs and then print out the stat cards as well. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. They're planning on having a crowdfunding campaign later on this year as well. So stay tuned because I'll report on that if that ever launches. Titanforge was also there with a booth demoing their Starship game, Eve, but also Bloodfields, which actually I bought some of their STL files way back when it was just STLs and printable cards, but now they ran a campaign where they have physical Hips plastic miniatures for that game, which again, I wasn't able to demo, but glad to see the presence of these 3D printable companies that are there. Ran into Simon from Creature Caster. I gotten to know him over the past year with Judgment Eternal Champions. Really wanted to play in that tournament, but it sold out super fast. Got on the waiting list, but never made it in. But was able to talk with him and told him that I wanted to get into airbrushing, and he said he was willing to provide me a tutorial and really suggested that I get the Iwata Eclipse, which was one of my purchases from the convention. So hopefully I'll be coming out with a video series soon about getting into airbrushing, as I have been intimidated in learning how to use that tool. So Simon's going to be helping me out with that series. Also was surprised to see that Woodland Scenics was there, and they are now coming out with a tabletop wargaming version of all of their terrain. Now they are known for creating hobby terrain for primarily railroaders, and I think they're super smart to tap into specifically marketing towards tabletop wargamers, because we are all familiar with Woodland Scenics in creating bases and scenery, and so for them to now be able to market and push some of their products, I think is super smart of them. I am hoping to be able to do a video for them, as we're going to potentially collaborate together. So other than my airbrush, what were some of my purchases? I really didn't buy that much stuff this year. I just picked up a couple more paints from Monument Hobbies. If you haven't seen my video where I did switch out and decided to go with their line of paints, go ahead and check that out here. But just picked up a couple of paints from them. Also, I did end up picking up these paints from Turbo Dork. They have reformulated all of their paints, and their paint pots now are significantly larger. Also, they had a bunch of different colors as well. And the one that I'm super excited about is that they have these Zenithift paints, where you zenithal white on top of a black base coat on your miniature, and based off of the undercoating, it's going to be a different color from just one paint pot. So what's on top of the black is going to be a different color than what's on the white, which is super interesting. So I'm hoping that this is going to help me speed paint some of those Revenants run Marines, so that I can paint them up quickly. So I'm going to be experimenting with these paints and using these to speed paint some of my future armies. I also picked up some more terrain stuff, these tufts of grass, which I always need and want to put on the bases of my miniatures. I also am going to be checking out some of this foliage, which they did a demo and I was super impressed by, from Gamers Grass. I went to their booth and not only picked up some of their flocking, but also was impressed with how cool these plants look. Now here it looks sort of fake, flat and being 2D, but they showed me how to curl them up and layer them so that they look like real plants. And so I'm going to be trying these out for the first time. I didn't buy any games this year. These were my only purchases. I did though get the advanced badge. They're not calling them VIG badges anymore, but you can get the basic badge for $55 where you don't get any swag, or you can opt to pay more. I think this was $150 some to get the advanced badge. And this was what came in the swag bag. So this year we have this Clash of Steel box where there are 17 of these, I think they're 15mm tanks, so it's a tank game from Gale Force 9. I have no idea about the rule set, but am wondering whether or not I can use these tanks for practicing airbrushing, especially putting camo on them. So whether or not I play the game, I might just keep this box just to be able to practice airbrushing. Also, did end up receiving a combat patrol box of the Sisters of Battle, which is totally ironic because I just got done deciding that I'm going to be 3D printing an army for the Sisters. So I might be giving this one away as one of the GGGGs. Did receive a Shatterpoint box, but probably the least interesting. Shatterpoint, I do play Shatterpoint, but probably the least interesting because even though Darth Vader is in this box, it just comes with Stormtroopers, sort of regular Stormtroopers, which, you know, I have plenty of Stormtroopers to be able to play. So not super excited about that one. But also received Star Wars Legion box, a Kings of War sample pack. We have Marvel Crisis Protocol with Professor X and Shadow King. War Machine. So this is super interesting. War Machine did have a booth there. I sort of feel like they're dying out because there was a section in the playing hall where War Machine was being played, but I didn't see that many players. And they did go with the 3D printing model where it's sort of print on demand, which I think it was a mistake for them not to sell the STL files instead. So I just sort of feel bad because I felt like War Machine for a while was the alternative to Games Workshop, but it sort of fizzled out. And then a bunch of other random stuff like this Battletech mech, as well as a couple of books and individual miniatures. Considering that this Combat Patrol box is $160, I do think I got my money's worth, but it does tend to be a crapshoot whether or not, sort of dependent on whether or not you are interested in these other games or models, if you're getting your money's worth out of it. Fortunately, you're able to sell them if you want to get your money's worth back, but overall, I purchased the more expensive badge just to be able to show you what's in them on my channel. One other person that I did meet was Gaetano from One Page Rules. They were sharing a booth with another vendor, so I almost missed them. But I'm wondering whether or not for next year's Adepticon to have a narrative campaign option for an event at Adepticon where I can help run that for One Page Rules. Because I think I'm surprised that OPR isn't there as an event option. So I really want to see whether or not that's something that others might be able to help me with. So if you're interested in helping out with running a tournament, which I have never done before, for One Page Rules at next year's Adepticon, go ahead and make a comment below and I will try to see if that's something Gaetano might be interested in doing. But am excited about Adepticon next year, excited about all the different kinds of games that I can play. If you attended Adepticon, go ahead and make a comment below saying what games and events you played and which ones you really liked. Again, use the link to go to my Patreon page if you're interested in receiving one of the many gratitude gifts for this month. Otherwise, happy gaming. We'll see you next time.